They called me a child abuser in a room where every cough sounded like a verdict, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. My name is Janelle Carter. I ran a house that looked like a magazine and loved a little girl who liked her pancakes, shaped like stars. And if you've ever wiped a fevered brow at 3 a.m. and hummed Motown until the thunder quit, you know the kind of love I'm talking about. So when the prosecutor held up that photograph of a bruise and Sloane Pierce crossed her legs like she was hosting the show, I told the judge, the jury, the ceiling tiles. If they were listening, I never touched that child. Not like that, not ever. You know what I mean? There's a way a courthouse hums when folks think they already know the ending. A low buzz that crawls under your skin, I could hear it, while I remembered the small stuff that makes a life. Evie asking for cinnamon on her apple slices like confetti. Evie's stuffed fox missing an eye because love is hard on toys. Me in that kitchen at dawn, coffee dripping skillet. Warm hearts on Tuesdays, stars on Fridays, and the quiet that comes when a kid in footy pajamas relaxes into your shoulder because the world is finally soft again. Grant Whitmore. Her dad loved her in the way men who lose their wives sometimes love. With money, with schedules, with good intentions that clock in and out. He'd stand in the doorway like someone peeking into a life he wasn't sure he had permission to enter. And I made space for him every time because grief is clumsy and fatherhood is louder up close than it looks on paper. But then Sloane arrived with perfume you could see and sympathy you could spend. And one afternoon, she laid that photo down between us like a trap, a purple mark on Evie's cheek with edges too neat to be real. I said as much. My voice steady until it wasn't. Grant went pale. Sloane smiled like she'd just solved a puzzle, and the whole thing tilted. Cops at the door, neighbors suddenly fascinated with their shoes, me in a back seat, praying to keep my breath where I could find it. Jail is fluorescent lights and blankets with cigarette burns. Court is microphones and people who say, "Sweetheart," when what they mean is, "Sit there and behave, my lawyer." Ava Lynn had a spine like a steel rail and hands that shook. Only when she was holding truth, she told me to keep my eyes off Sloane, which is like telling a person not to watch a lit match in a dry field. And on day 2, they put Evie on the stand so small her feet didn't touch the floor, little fox clenched like a life vest. That prosecutor crouched and softened his voice. Sloane leaned forward with a smile sharp as glass, and Evie's eyes bounced from her dad to me and back again, until she picked the safest shore she could see in that moment. Yeah, that happened. I stood before the judge, could slam the gavel, begging with my whole chest, and the room snapped shut around me like a trap you pretend isn't there. Maybe this is where I tell you about the quiet hero you don't notice until the twist lands. Detective Raul Mendoza, salt at the temples, shoes that had seen years of bad floors, not on the case officially, but he sat in the back and stared at that photo, the way a fisherman watches current patient stubborn. Then he drove to a pharmacy 3 towns over and asked about purchases, called a friend in a lab who owed him. Took a magnifying lens to pixels until his eyes burned, while the city decided I was guilty at church and in line at the market, while the other nannies made parentheses with their bodies and whispered while I memorized the pattern of ceiling paint in a cell, because sleep wouldn't stay. Raul was pulling a thread, and you know what happens when the right thread moves. The whole sweater remembers, it's only knots. Back at the house, Sloane rehearsed Evie in a doorway, low voice sugar on top, and poison underneath. Tell the nice man what you told me. Baby Janelle hurt you. If you don't say it, she'll go away forever. Fear is a clumsy author, but it writes fast, and a 5-year-old will protect the person they love, even if it means breaking their own voice. Meanwhile, Grant told himself he was saving his child by trusting the picture, by trusting the woman who handed it to him. It's wild how loud a lie can get when it borrows a father's panic. The morning Raul's lab report came back. Ava met him in a coffee shop, and put both hands on the folder like she was steadying a boat foundation, adhesive. A dusting of glitter bruises don't come with craft store ingredients, he said. It plain, and my laugh on the phone sounded like a bark. I didn't recognize because hope feels like oxygen when you've lived underwater. The next day, the courthouse steps were a red carpet for microphones. Inside, the air felt heavy like it had opinions, Ava called Detective Mendoza. The prosecutor objected, the judge squinted, and Raul told the room what bruises look like when they're real than what was on Evie's face in that photo, a paint job, edges too clean, skin too flat. Chemistry where there should have been blood. Yeah. You could hear the gallery gasp like a tide. Sloane's smile finally slipped off its hooks. Grant's shoulders dropped like a man realizing the floor he'd been standing on was paper. And then the smallest voice in the room cut through everything. Evie, still in the back, with her fox, stood on her chair, like she needed more air, and said, "I don't want to lie anymore." The judge told her to sit, the prosecutor flustered. Ava asked permission. The room was a drum of noise, but Evie looked at her dad, then at me, then at Sloane, and said, "The sentence that split time. Miss Sloane told me to say, Janelle hurt me if I didn't say it. She said Janelle would go away forever. I swear on my mom's stars, Janelle didn't hurt me. I have seen strong men pretend they don't cry, and I watched Grant stop pretending." He turned to Sloane, and his voice was both a whisper and a thunderclap. "What did you do?" She reached for his arm like a brand claiming cattle. "Don't be dramatic. Are you picking a Maid sob story over your daughter's safety?" He laughed once, a sound that hurt to hear. "That's my daughter's safety. You put your hands on, that's my kid. You turned into a prop." Security took Sloane by the elbow when the judge ordered her held for questioning. She twisted and spit a sentence at me I won't repeat, because some lies don't deserve a second life, and the room exhaled a different air. After that, Act 3 wasn't fireworks. It was the machine turning in a new direction. Slow but certain filing statements. Raul on the stand again, with the lab report. In black and white, Ava threading the needle. The judge reading long enough for the room to remember what silence weighs, and then a verdict that slid into me like a key down a well, not guilty. I didn't cheer, I just went quiet the way people do. When the sound inside them finally matches the sound outside. They took the cuffs off. My wrists looked like two pale rings someone forgot to size. And when I turned, Evie was running little sneakers on ancient tile, a squeak and a launch, and we almost fell, but we didn't. We stood there with 100 cameras snapping a private thing, a hug that meant we had outlived something meant to break us. Outside, the questions flew like gnats. "Will you sue? What do you say to caregivers? How do you feel?" I said. "I'm taking Evie home." Grant found his voice on, sorry, and it cracked on the way out. He didn't reach for me like I belonged to him. He asked how to make it right for her, I told him. "Start there. Because forgiveness is a living thing, not a press release. It eats it, sleeps. It sometimes bites," Raul sent me a picture of his overwatered fern with a thumbs up later. Ava tried decaf for 48 hours, and then surrendered the county-filed charges against Sloane for tampering and perjury. The headlines spun, and in the quiet. After I made pancakes that looked like a heart, and kind of like a duck. If you squinted, Evie said it was definitely a fox, and I let her win, because kids should win most arguments about breakfast. Here's what I learned. Where the air is thin and honest power likes to hold the microphone, and money likes to turn the volume up. But truth keeps its own stubborn mic. Sometimes it's a tired detective who doesn't clock out. When his shift does, sometimes, it's a young lawyer whose hands steady right. When it counts, sometimes, it's a 5-year-old on a chair, saying, "I don't want to lie anymore." And sometimes it's you, the person they labeled before they met the one who kept humming at 3 a.m. Because somebody small needed the world to be soft for one more minute. So if you're watching this with your arms crossed, Go ahead and uncross them. Ask yourself who got to tell the story first, and why. Ask how many times a picture made you forget to look at the edges, and tell me this in the comments. What does justice look like up close to you? Should we forgive people who followed the loudest voice in the room or hold them to every step they took the wrong way? Have you ever been judged before? Anyone even asked your name? Tell me where you're watching from, and tell me which part of this you're still arguing with. Because the ending isn't applause, the good part is what we decide to do the next time a room thinks it already knows the ending. So